Hey everyone, welcome back to Coach Hall Writes. Today's video is an updated video all about how to write a rhetorical analysis thesis statement. So in this video, I'm going to give you my best tips to help you make sure that your thesis statement is defensible and earns the point according to the rhetorical analysis rubric for the AP Lang exam. Before we get started, please make sure to subscribe here on YouTube. Make sure you turn those notifications on by tapping that bell. That will make sure that you don't miss any future AP Lang videos. And also, if you are a TikTok user, please go ahead and follow me at Coach Hall Writes on that platform as well. Let's start by defining what a defensible thesis actually is for rhetorical analysis. The way I explain it to my students is that defensible simply means that it's able to be proven. It's a claim that you can defend. It's important to note that the thesis can go anywhere in the essay. Typically, though, for the AP Lang exam, students tend to put their thesis as the last sentence in their intro. It's also important to recognize that the thesis can technically be more than one consecutive sentence. Now, as far as what makes a thesis defensible for rhetorical analysis, the thesis must contain rhetorical choices. Now, I have separate videos on what exactly is a rhetorical choice, but here's a quick clarification. Rhetorical choices are typically expressed as verbs. Some examples of this might be compares, contrasts, repeats. You might even see verbs like acknowledges or reminisces on. That's because rhetorical choices convey what the author is doing. In contrast, rhetorical devices are nouns. It's what the writer is using. So this would be things like repetition, metaphor, allusion. Many times you can take the noun and turn it into a verb. And so I want to be clear here. As a teacher, I encourage my students to use what I call rhetorically accurate verbs. However, on the exam, if students use nouns in their thesis instead of verbs, meaning they use devices instead of choices, some teachers might even call it strategies, that's okay. Those students are still eligible for the thesis point. So if we're making a checklist here, the most important thing we need for a defensible thesis is those rhetorical choices. Now, here's another tip for you. In my classroom, I encourage my students to include the specific message, argument, or purpose as well. Technically, the rubric does not say that that is necessary. However, I have found that when students include the message, argument, or purpose, whichever one the prompt asks for, they tend to write stronger essays because they're more likely to be answering the prompt. And in some cases, the prompt will tell students a simplistic message, argument, or purpose. While students can use this phrasing or synonyms, I encourage my own students to dig deeper and to be more specific. When the message, argument, or purpose is provided in the prompt, it's usually a bit superficial. And so we want to dig deeper in our thesis if we can. So the second thing that I add to my checklist for my students is that I want that specific message, argument, or purpose after their choices. I already mentioned some examples of choices. And like I said, I do have other videos that explain this concept in more detail. I will link those videos in the description box below. But here is a short list that gives some examples of choices. You're welcome to screenshot this list if you think it would help you, but please know that it is not an inclusive list, meaning that there are other rhetorical choices out there that are not on this list. Now let's talk about some phrases that we want to avoid as we are writing our defensible thesis. We do not want to say that the speaker makes several rhetorical choices such as. This is going to sound very redundant to your AP reader, so go ahead and just say what the choices are. Don't tell your reader that they are rhetorical choices. Assume that your reader knows that. It would kind of be like if I said, the painter used many colors in their painting, such as red, blue, green, yellow, brown, and pink. We know that those are colors, so we don't need to say that they're colors. We also want to avoid phrases where it sounds like we are praising the writer. So your job is not to pass judgment on the quality of the rhetorical choices they made per se. You are just analyzing how they made those choices to convey a message, develop an argument, or achieve a purpose. We also don't want to use first person in our thesis statement. So we don't want to say, Things like I'm going to write about or I think, those phrases aren't necessary. So let me show you a sentence frame that you can use in order to write a defensible thesis. Basically, what you're going to do here is you're going to plug in the specifics for your prompt. So it says in his or her, so whichever pronoun is correct. And then tone is optional, but I encourage my students to try to put the tone word in there. You can actually even use two words if you want to. So you could say the blank and have it be two tone words, or blank yet blank and have it be sort of contrasting tone words. Then you're going to want to specify what type of passage it is. So is it a speech, a letter, an article, maybe even an excerpt of a larger work? This information will be available to you in your prompt. Now I put to audience in parentheses because that doesn't always fit every prompt, but many times speeches or letters have a very clear audience. Again, this is a sentence frame, so you can customize it to fit your style and the information that you have in your prompt. Where it says speaker, you're going to put your speaker's name there. The first time you introduce your speaker, you should use their full name. After that, you use their last name. We typically don't refer to speakers by their first name because that's considered informal for academic writing. Then you're going to include 2 rhetorical choices. If you intend to write about 3, you would just add a third one there. And then notice that we have, after the choices, the message, argument, or purpose, whichever one your prompt asks for. Here's another sentence frame. It's the same thing, except this time we're adding on a statement at the end, ultimately causing the audience to consider. So in this one, we are still including the audience, but it's later on in the thesis. Either option is fine. And like I said, because these are sentence frames, you can customize it to your style, though I typically recommend that you put the choices first and then the message, argument, or purpose, because sometimes when students flip them, the syntax gets a little bit awkward. Now let's play a little game called Is It Defensible? This is a game that I play with my students. Basically what I do is I give them different potential thesis statements, and they have to tell me whether or not it's defensible and why. So if you'd like to play along, go ahead and pause the video now. All right, so here are the answers. The first one is not defensible because there are no rhetorical choices. Example 2 and example 3 have rhetorical choices in the orange. Notice that example 2 has uses, juxtaposition, and emotional appeals, so it's a little bit vague there. It's the noun form, but it would still count on the exam. Whereas example 3 arguably has more precise language for those choices. And then that softer blue color there, that's going to be the message, argument, or purpose. So here's another one for a different passage. If you'd like to play along and decide if it's defensible, go ahead and pause the video now. And here are your answers. So 1 and 2 are defensible. Notice that they have the choices and message, argument, or purpose, but the sentence structure is a little bit different for these. Example 3 is not defensible. Notice that there's no orange. It just says multiple rhetorical choices, but it does not actually identify specific rhetorical choices. Therefore, it's not defensible, even though it does say the message. Now, number 3 can be fixed very quickly, simply by adding in those rhetorical choices. And there you have it. That's what makes a thesis statement defensible for an AP Lang rhetorical analysis essay. If you found this video helpful, please make sure that you give it a like and be sure to subscribe. That way you don't miss any future AP Lang videos. And until next time, happy writing!